The soldier collapsed against the doorframe of the barn, just as the first snowflakes began to fall. His hand pressed against the blood seeping through his torn shirt, and the orc woman who had been mucking out the stalls froze with her pitchfork, raised like a weapon. Tanner Whitlock's vision swam as he tried to focus on the figure before him, registering the green skin and tusks before his knees buckled, and he went down hard on the frozen ground. He heard footsteps approaching, heavy and deliberate, and he tried to reach for the knife at his belt, but his fingers would not obey. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was a pair of amber eyes staring down at him with an expression he could not read. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments: the crackle of fire, the smell of herbs he did not recognize, pain radiating from his chest and shoulder. Tanner's eyes opened to rough timber beams above him and the flicker of firelight dancing across them. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as agony lanced through his torso. A hand pushed him back down, firm but not rough. "Do not move. Your wounds will open again." The voice was female, deeper than a human woman's, with an accent that added a guttural edge to certain consonants. Tanner turned his head and saw her properly for the first time. She knelt beside the low cot where he lay, her green skin appearing almost golden in the firelight. Her tusks were small, barely protruding past her lower lip, and her dark hair was pulled back in a thick braid that fell over one broad shoulder. She wore simple homespun clothing, a rough tunic and trousers stained with dirt and blood. His blood, he realized. "You are orc," he said, his voice rasping, "and you are very observant for a man who nearly died on my doorstep." She reached for a clay bowl beside her. "Drink this." "Why did you help me?" Tanner eyed the bowl suspiciously. "Your people and mine are enemies." She met his gaze steadily. "I do not remember swearing allegiance to your war, and I do not let things die on my land if I can prevent it. Not animals, not men, not even fool soldiers who wander into orc territory bleeding everywhere. This is orc territory." Tanner tried to remember his route, how far he had run after the ambush. His company had been escorting supply wagons through the disputed borderlands when raiders attacked. Not orcs, he remembered. Bandits. Human bandits. But in the chaos and confusion, with blood in his eyes and bodies falling around him, he had simply run. "I did not know. Most humans do not. They think we live in caves in the mountains like the stories say." She held the bowl closer to his lips. "This will help with the pain and keep infection away, unless you would prefer to suffer nobly and die slowly." The hint of dry humor in her voice surprised him. Tanner had been a soldier for 6 years, since he was 18, and in that time he had been taught that orcs were savage, brutal creatures who killed without mercy. The woman before him did not match that description. He drank from the bowl, wincing at the bitter taste. "Good," she said, setting the bowl aside. "Now sleep. Your body needs to heal." "What is your name?" The question came out before he could stop it. She hesitated, studying him with those strange amber eyes. "Grusha. And I already know yours, Tanner Whitlock. It was on the papers in your pack." "You went through my things. I was checking to see if you were a deserter or a spy. The papers say you are neither, just unlucky." She stood, her height considerable even in the low-ceilinged room. "Sleep now." Tanner wanted to ask more questions, but exhaustion dragged at him like an anchor. The warmth of the fire and whatever herbs she had given him pulled him down into darkness once more. The next time he woke, pale daylight filtered through gaps in the wooden walls. His wounds throbbed with a dull ache rather than the sharp agony from before. Tanner carefully propped himself up on one elbow and looked around. He was in a small one-room cabin, sparsely furnished but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, a simple table and 2 chairs sat near the door, and his cot was positioned close enough to the fire for warmth. His pack and weapons were nowhere to be seen. The door opened and Grusha entered carrying an armload of firewood. Snow dusted her shoulders and hair. She glanced at him and set the wood down beside the fireplace. "You are awake. That is good." She brushed snow from her arms. "There is water in the bucket if you are thirsty. Can you sit up without tearing your stitches?" Tanner looked down at himself for the first time. Someone had removed his blood-soaked shirt and replaced it with bandages wrapped around his chest and left shoulder. "You stitched me." "The sword cut across your chest and shoulder was deep. Without stitches, you would have continued bleeding." She moved to the fire and began building it up. "I have some experience with wounds. Animals mostly, but the principle is the same. I am not an animal." "No, but you bled just as much as a pig would have." She glanced at him over her shoulder. "Do not be offended. I meant it practically, not as an insult." Tanner found himself without a ready response. He reached for the water bucket with his good arm and managed to drink without spilling too much. The water was cold and clean, soothing his parched throat. "How long have I been here?" he asked. 3 days. "You woke twice before, but you were out of your mind with fever. You said many things." Grusha added another log to the fire. Most of it was names. "Calling out for people who were not here. 3 days. His company would think him dead if any of them survived the ambush." The thought sat heavy in his chest. He had friends among those men, good soldiers he had fought beside for years. "Did you see anyone else?" "Other soldiers, perhaps wounded like me." She shook her head. "Only you, but I do not go far from my homestead. If there were others, they did not come this way." Tanner absorbed this in silence. He was alone then, stranded in orc territory with only a strange green-skinned woman for company. The situation should have terrified him, but exhaustion and pain dulled his fear. Besides, if Grusha had wanted him dead, she had plenty of opportunities while he lay unconscious and helpless. "Why do you live out here alone?" he asked. "I thought orcs lived in clans." Grusha's expression hardened slightly. "We do. I do not anymore. You were exiled. I chose to leave." She stood and moved to the table, where she began preparing something from a sack. "My clan did not approve of my choices, so I came here where their approval means nothing." Tanner heard the finality in her tone and decided not to push further. Everyone had wounds, he knew, and not all of them showed on the skin. He shifted on the cot, trying to find a more comfortable position, and pain flared across his chest. He hissed between his teeth. "You need to stay still," Grusha said without turning around. "Every time you move too much, you risk tearing the stitches. Then I will have to do them again, and I promise you will not enjoy that while awake." "How long until I can travel?" The question came out more plaintively than he intended. "Weeks, perhaps longer if infection sets in." She turned and met his eyes. "I know this is not where you wish to be, but you do not have a choice. The snow is falling heavy now. Even if your wounds were healed, traveling in this weather would kill you. You are here until spring comes." The weight of her words settled over him like a blanket. Trapped. Dependent on the mercy of someone his people would call an enemy. Tanner lay back down and stared at the ceiling beams, trying to process this new reality. Grusha brought him food after a while, a thick stew with vegetables and grain. She helped him sit up enough to eat, her hands surprisingly gentle despite their obvious strength. The stew was bland but hot and filling, and Tanner realized he was ravenous. He ate 2 bowls before his stomach protested. "Thank you," he said as she took the empty bowl away. The words felt inadequate but necessary. Grusha nodded. "You are welcome. Now rest more. Your body is working hard to heal." Over the following days, Tanner slowly grew stronger. The fever did not return, and the pain in his wounds gradually lessened from excruciating to merely painful. Grusha tended him with efficient care, changing his bandages twice daily and making him drink bitter herbal teas that she promised would prevent infection. She was not warm, exactly, but neither was she cruel. She simply went about her business with the same practical efficiency she might show any injured creature. Tanner learned her routine through observation. She woke before dawn to tend a small herd of goats she kept in the barn, the same barn where he had collapsed. She brought them fresh hay and water, then returned to the cabin to build up the fire and prepare food. During the day, she worked on various tasks, mending tools, carding wool from her goats, occasionally venturing out to check snares she had set for rabbits and other small game. In the evenings, she sat by the fire and worked on knitting or carving small wooden figures, her large hands moving with surprising delicacy. She did not talk much unless he asked her direct questions, and even then her answers were brief. But she was not unfriendly, just solitary by nature. Tanner found himself watching her when she was not looking, studying the way she moved, the set of her shoulders, the occasional furrow that appeared between her brows when she concentrated on some task. By the end of the first week, he could sit up without help and even stand for brief periods, though walking more than a few steps left him dizzy and breathless. Grusha allowed him to move to the chair by the fire during the day, which felt like a tremendous victory after so many days confined to the cot. "You are healing well," she observed one morning as she unwrapped his bandages to check the wounds. "The cuts are closing clean. You will have impressive scars." Tanner looked down at his chest. The sword had caught him in a diagonal slash from his left shoulder across his pectoral muscles, and a second smaller cut ran parallel below it. The stitches were neat and tight, the flesh around them pink and tender but not inflamed. "I already have scars," he said. "These will just add to the collection." Grusha's fingers paused in their work. Her gaze traveled across his torso, taking in the various marks that decorated his skin. A puckered scar on his right side from a spear thrust 2 years ago. The long, thin line along his ribs from a knife fight in a tavern. Smaller marks from arrows, cuts, burns. The map of a soldier's life written on flesh. "You have fought in many battles," she said quietly. "I have been a soldier since I was 18. 6 years of fighting." Tanner watched her face as she examined his scars. Most women he had known found them ugly, disturbing reminders of violence and death. But Grusha's expression held something different, not disgust, but almost curiosity. "Does it bother you? Why would it bother me?" She began applying fresh bandages. "Everyone who lives carries marks from that life. Yours are simply more visible than most. My betrothed thought they were hideous." The words came out before Tanner could stop them. He had not meant to mention Eliza, had tried not to think about her. Grusha's hand stilled. "You are betrothed?" "Was. She broke it off before my last deployment, said she could not marry a man who was more scar tissue than skin." The bitterness in his voice surprised him. He thought he had moved past that hurt, but apparently it still lived somewhere in his chest alongside his wounds. "Then she was a fool," Grusha said flatly. She tied off the bandage with quick, efficient movements. "These marks show you survived, that you are strong. There is no shame in that." Something in her matter-of-fact tone eased the old ache. Tanner found himself studying her face, the strong line of her jaw, the way her tusks caught the firelight. "Thank you," he said softly. She met his eyes for a moment, then nodded and stood. "I need to check my snares." "Do not do anything foolish while I am gone. I make no promises." The attempt at humor felt rusty but genuine. The corner of Grusha's mouth twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. Then she pulled on her heavy cloak and went out into the cold. Tanner sat by the fire and thought about what she had said. "These marks show you survived. It was such a simple observation, but it reframed everything. His scars were not marks of shame or ugliness. They were proof he had lived through things that should have killed him. They were victories in their own way. He flexed his left arm carefully, testing the range of motion. The shoulder was still stiff and painful, but he could move it. In time, with care and patience, it would heal. He would add 2 more scars to his collection and move forward. That was what soldiers did. They carried their wounds and kept marching. When Grusha returned an hour later with 2 rabbits from her snares, Tanner was attempting to poke at the fire with a stick. She raised an eyebrow at him. I said nothing foolish. That is a matter of interpretation. But she did not sound angry. She hung the rabbits from a hook near the door and began the process of skinning and preparing them. Tanner watched her work with practiced hands, making quick, clean cuts. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked. "My mother taught me." All orc children learn to hunt and prepare game. It is necessary for survival. She worked as she talked, never pausing. She also taught me to track, to fight, to read the weather and land. Everything I needed to live on my own if necessary. Did she know you would leave the clan? Grusha's knife stilled for just a moment. She knew I was different, that I did not think the way others did. She prepared me for the possibility. She resumed her work. "She died 3 years ago. That is when I left. I am sorry." "Do not be. She lived a full life and died with honor. There is nothing to regret." Grusha set the prepared meat aside and moved to wash her hands in a basin. "Your mother, is she still living?" "Yes. She lives in a village 2 weeks' ride from the capital. She is a seamstress. My father died when I was young." Tanner realized this was the most they had spoken since he arrived. She did not want me to become a soldier, but there was not much work in the village. The army paid well and sent money home. And now you are here, far from your mother and your duties. Grusha dried her hands. "Does that trouble you?" "Yes, but I cannot change it." Tanner met her eyes. "I am grateful that you found me, that you helped me despite having no reason to do so." "I had a reason. I do not like death." She moved to prepare the rabbits for cooking. "There is too much death in the world already. I will not add to it if I can help otherwise." They fell into a companionable silence after that, Grusha cooking while Tanner tended the fire as best he could with his limited mobility. When the meal was ready, they ate together at the small table, and for the first time since the ambush, Tanner felt something like peace. The winter deepened, and with it came heavy snows that buried the world in white. Tanner grew stronger day by day, able to move around the cabin more freely and even help with small tasks. Grusha removed his stitches after 2 weeks, declaring the wounds healed enough that they would finish closing on their own. The scars were raised and pink, still tender to the touch, but no longer painful unless he stretched too far or too quickly. He began helping with daily chores as his strength returned. Feeding the goats became his morning responsibility, and he found he enjoyed the simple creatures with their curious personalities and constant demands for attention. Grusha taught him to card wool, and though his large soldier's hands were clumsy at first, he eventually developed a rhythm. They worked side by side in the evenings, Grusha knitting while Tanner prepared the wool, the fire crackling between them. They talked more as the days passed. Small conversations at first about the weather or the goats or what supplies they would need to make last until spring. But gradually, the conversations deepened. Tanner told her about growing up poor in a small village, about watching his mother work herself to exhaustion at her loom, about the day he joined the army and saw his first real battle. Grusha shared stories of her clan, of the harsh but beautiful mountain valleys where they lived, of the complex social structures and honor codes that governed orc society. "I never wanted to be a warrior," she told him one evening as snow fell thick outside the cabin. My clan valued strength and fighting prowess above all else, but I wanted to raise animals to grow things to live peacefully. They saw this as weakness. That is not weakness, Tanner said. Creating life takes more courage than taking it. Grusha looked at him, her amber eyes reflecting firelight. Your people would not agree. Humans see us as monsters fit only for killing. Some humans, yes, but I am learning that what we are taught and what is true are often different things. He set aside the wool he had been working on. You saved my life. You have shown me more kindness than I had any right to expect. That is not the action of a monster. No, she agreed quietly. But if your people knew you were here, living with an orc, they would call you traitor. They would say I bewitched you or took you prisoner. Let them say what they want. I know the truth. Tanner surprised himself with the vehemence in his voice. You are the most honorable person I have met in years, orc or human. Grusha turned away, but not before he saw something vulnerable flash across her face. You should rest. Tomorrow will be a hard day. The goats need their hooves trimmed and they hate it. Tanner let the subject drop, but something had shifted between them. An acknowledgement, perhaps, of the strange bond that was forming in this isolated place where the rules of the outside world did not quite reach. The next day proved as challenging as Grusha had predicted. The goats were uncooperative and loud in their protests, and it took both of them working together to hold each animal still long enough to trim its hooves properly. By the time they finished with the last goat, they were both covered in straw and dirt, and Tanner's shoulder ached from the exertion. But they were laughing, breathless and ridiculous, sharing the triumph of a difficult task completed. I think that brown one hates me, Tanner said, rubbing his shoulder where the goat had butted him repeatedly. She kept trying to knock me over. That one hates everyone. She is mean by nature. Grusha brushed straw from her hair. But she gives the richest milk, so I tolerate her bad temper. A fair trade. Tanner looked at Grusha and felt something tighten in his chest. She was smiling, genuinely smiling, and it transformed her face. The hardness she usually carried softened, revealing someone younger and lighter underneath. Beautiful, he thought, then immediately tried to dismiss the thought. She was orc. He was human. The gulf between them was insurmountable, but the thought would not leave. Over the following days and weeks, Tanner found himself noticing things about Grusha he had not paid attention to before. The way she hummed softly to herself while cooking. The gentleness with which she handled the baby goat born in the middle of a snowstorm. The surprising grace of her movements despite her size and strength. The intelligence in her eyes when she explained some aspect of animal husbandry or wilderness survival. He tried to ignore the growing warmth in his chest when she smiled at him, tried to dismiss the way his pulse quickened when their hands accidentally touched while working side by side. This was madness. He was a human soldier. She was an orc woman living in exile. There could be nothing between them but this temporary arrangement born of necessity. Yet the feelings persisted, growing stronger despite his efforts to bury them. Grusha must have noticed something was different, because she began watching him with a cautious expression, like someone approaching a half-tamed wild animal. She was careful not to touch him unnecessarily, kept more distance between them when they worked. The easy companionship they had built began to feel strained. One evening, as they sat by the fire in tense silence, Tanner could bear it no longer. "Have I offended you somehow?" he asked. Grusha looked up from the sock she was knitting. "No, why do you ask? You have been avoiding me." "Keeping distance. If I did something wrong, I would like to know so I can apologize." She set down her knitting and folded her hands in her lap. "You did nothing wrong. The fault is mine. I am being foolish." "Foolish how? Foolish in ways that would be better left unspoken." Her voice was tight. Tanner's heart began to race. Grusha, please, we have lived together for over a month now. I thought we had become friends at least. Friends, she repeated, and something like pain crossed her face. Yes, friends. She stood abruptly. I need to check the barn. The wind is picking up and I want to make sure the door is properly latched. It is freezing out there and nearly dark. The barn can wait until morning. It cannot wait. She grabbed her cloak and headed for the door. Tanner stood as well, ignoring the pull in his healing wounds. What are you running from? Grusha stopped with her hand on the door latch. She did not turn around. From making another mistake, from wanting something I cannot have. The admission hung in the air between them. Tanner's breath caught. Grusha, do not. Her voice was rough. Please do not make this harder than it already is. What if I want the same thing? The words came out barely above a whisper. She turned then, slowly, and the look on her face was raw and unguarded. You do not know what you are saying. When spring comes, you will return to your people. To your world. This is only temporary. Is it? Tanner took a step toward her. I have spent 6 years following orders, fighting wars I barely understand for causes that mean nothing to me. I have been alone in crowds, surrounded by comrades but never truly known. And then I end up here, injured and helpless, and you save me. You care for me, you see me. Another step. For the first time in my life, I feel like I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Tanner. His name on her lips sounded like a prayer and a warning both. I know this is impossible. I know all the reasons why it cannot work, but I do not care. He was close enough now to see the gold flecks in her amber eyes. Tell me you feel nothing. Tell me I am alone in this. If you can do that honestly, I will never speak of it again. Grusha's hands clenched into fists at her sides. I cannot tell you that. Then what are we going to do? I do not know. The vulnerability in her voice broke something open in his chest. I have been alone for 3 years. I chose this isolation to escape judgment and scorn. And then you arrived, bleeding and half dead, and I thought I was simply helping another creature in need. But you did not leave when you could. You stayed. You talked to me like I was a person, not a monster. You laughed with me. You made this lonely place feel like a home. She shook her head. I tried to ignore it, tried to remind myself of all the reasons this was foolish. But every day you were here, it became harder, and now I do not know how to go back to being alone. Tanner reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, he took her hand in his. Her skin was warm and rough from work, her fingers strong. Then do not go back. Stay here with me, wherever here ends up being. Your people will never accept it. An orc and a human together, we would be outcasts. You already are an outcast by choice. And I have no one waiting for me except a mother who will love me regardless. Let them talk. Let them judge. He raised her hand to his chest, pressing her palm against the scars that crossed his heart. These marks show I survived. Whatever comes next, I will survive that too. But I do not want to survive alone anymore. Grusha's breath hitched. Her fingers spread across his chest, tracing the raised lines of his scars with something like reverence. I do not understand your people. In my culture, scars are marks of honor. They show strength and survival. But humans hide them away like shameful secrets. Not all humans. Tanner covered her hand with his own. You said they were not ugly, that they showed I was strong. They are not ugly. Her voice was fierce. They are beautiful to me. The words hung between them, a confession and a claim. Tanner felt something in his chest crack wide open, releasing emotions he had been holding back for weeks. He pulled her closer, his other hand coming up to cup her face. She went still, her eyes searching his. May I kiss you? He asked. For answer, Grusha leaned down and pressed her lips to his. It was gentle at first, tentative, an exploration rather than a demand. Her tusks were smooth against his skin, her mouth warm. Tanner sank into the kiss, letting himself feel everything he had been denying. Want and tenderness and belonging all tangled together. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Grusha rested her forehead against his. "This is madness," she whispered. "Yes." Tanner smiled. "But I am tired of sanity." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other while the wind howled outside and the fire crackled behind them. Then Grusha led him back to the chairs by the fire, and they sat close together, her hand in his, talking quietly about what this meant and what they would do when spring came. They made no grand plans, spoke no dramatic vows. But they acknowledged the truth between them, that something unexpected and precious had grown in this isolated place, and neither of them was willing to let it go without a fight. That night, Tanner slept in his cot as usual, but the space felt different now. The cabin that had been a prison and then a refuge had become something else entirely. Home, maybe, or the beginning of one. The winter continued its slow march toward spring. Tanner and Grusha moved through their days with a new awareness of each other, finding excuses to touch in passing, sharing looks weighted with meaning. They were careful, almost cautious, as if afraid that acknowledging what was between them too boldly would shatter the fragile thing they were building. But gradually, inevitably, they grew bolder. Grusha began sitting closer to him in the evenings, their shoulders touching as they worked. Tanner found reasons to help her with tasks that required them to work in close proximity. They held hands while walking out to check the goats in the morning, their breath misting in the cold air. Small intimacies that felt enormous. One night, after a meal of roasted rabbit and root vegetables, Grusha took Tanner's hand and led him to the cot. She sat down and pulled him beside her, then carefully began to unbutton his shirt. "What are you doing?" he asked, though he made no move to stop her. "I want to see them properly." "Your scars." Her fingers were deft with the buttons. "If that is acceptable." Tanner's throat went dry. "Yes, it is acceptable." She pushed the shirt off his shoulders, her touch sending shivers across his skin that had nothing to do with cold. In the firelight, his scars stood out in sharp relief, pale lines and puckered marks scattered across his torso. Grusha traced them with her fingertips, one by one, with a gentleness that made his chest ache. "This one." She touched the long slash along his ribs. "Knife fight in a tavern." "The other man started it, but I finished it." Her fingers moved to the puckered scar on his right side. "This," spear thrust, "battle near the eastern border 2 years ago, missed my lung by inches." She continued her exploration, and Tanner found himself relaxing under her touch, the old shame he had carried about his marked skin falling away. Grusha was not repulsed or disturbed. She touched each scar like it was something valuable, something that mattered. When her fingers reached the new scars across his chest, the ones she had stitched herself, she paused. "These will heal well. The tissue is strong. Thanks to you." Tanner caught her hand and brought it to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "You gave me my life back." "No. You were strong enough to survive. I simply helped." But she looked pleased. Tanner tugged gently on her hand. "May I?" She understood without him having to explain. She pulled her tunic over her head in one smooth motion, revealing the leather binding she wore beneath, and the expanse of green skin marked with its own history. Tanner had seen orc warriors before, usually at a distance or in the chaos of battle, but he had never seen one like this. Intimate. Vulnerable. Grusha's scars were different from his. Many were smaller, scattered across her arms and shoulders like constellations, but one long mark curved along her left side from ribcage to hip. "What happened here?" he asked softly, touching the scar with reverence equal to what she had shown him. "A wild boar. I was 16 and foolish, thought I could take it down alone. It nearly gutted me." My mother found me and carried me back to camp. I was fevered for days." Grusha's voice was matter-of-fact, but Tanner heard the echo of old pain beneath it. "She never stopped reminding me that pride comes before stupidity." Wise words. His fingers traced the scar's length, marveling at how soft her skin was despite its obvious strength. "You have others." "Many." "Life is not gentle, especially for my people. We do not have the luxury of safety." Tanner leaned forward and pressed his lips to the boar scar, feeling her sharp intake of breath. "These are beautiful to me," he said against her skin, echoing her words back to her. Grusha's hand came up to cradle the back of his head, her fingers threading through his hair. "Tanner!" He looked up at her, saw the way the firelight caught in her eyes and turned them molten gold. "Yes, stay tonight, here, with me." It was not a demand but an invitation, and Tanner knew that what she was really asking went deeper than sharing a bed. She was asking him to choose her, fully and completely, despite all the complications and consequences that choice would bring. "Yes," he said simply. They lay down together on the narrow cot, bodies pressed close by necessity and desire both. Grusha pulled a blanket over them and wrapped her arms around him, her strength tempered by gentleness. Tanner rested his head against her shoulder, breathing in her scent of wood smoke and herbs and something uniquely her. "This changes everything," she murmured into his hair. "I know. There is no going back. I do not want to go back." She held him tighter, and Tanner felt the tension leave her body as she accepted his answer. They lay there in the firelight, two scarred souls who had found unexpected solace in each other, and let the world outside cease to matter. The next morning, Tanner woke wrapped in green arms and felt happier than he had in years. Grusha was still asleep, her face peaceful and younger in repose. He studied her features, memorizing the curve of her jaw, the way her tusks caught the early morning light, the thick braid of her hair falling across the pillow. She stirred and opened her eyes, focusing on him with a soft expression. "Good morning." "Good morning," he smiled. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in 3 years." She stretched, careful not to dislodge him. "We should rise. The goats will be demanding breakfast. Let them wait a moment longer." Tanner was not ready to leave the warmth of her arms. Grusha laughed, the sound rich and warm. "You are a bad influence." "I am an excellent influence. I am teaching you the value of laziness." "I know the value of laziness. It is called dead animals and spoiled milk." But she made no move to get up, and they lay there together for several more precious minutes before duty finally called them out into the cold morning. Their routine continued much as before, but everything felt different now. The chores they shared were suffused with new meaning, every touch a reminder of what they had acknowledged between them. Grusha taught Tanner to milk the goats, her hands guiding his until he found the right rhythm. He helped her butcher a deer she brought down with her bow, learning how to properly dress and preserve the meat. They worked side by side, repairing a section of the barn roof damaged by heavy snow, their combined efforts making quick work of the task. In the evenings, they talked about the future in increasingly specific terms. Tanner explained that his enlistment would be finished by summer, that he had already served his contracted years. He would be free to go wherever he wished, do whatever he wanted. Grusha described her small homestead, how she had built it up from nothing over 3 years, and how she dreamed of expanding it. More goats, maybe some sheep. A proper vegetable garden come spring. A life built on creation rather than destruction. "You could stay here," she said one night, the words careful but hopeful, "if you wanted. There is enough work for 2 people and the land is good." "I want that," Tanner said immediately. "I want to build something with you, a home, a life, whatever that looks like." "Your people will look for you. They will want to know what happened to their soldier. Then I will send word that I survived, but I am not returning. I fulfilled my contract. They have no legal claim on me." He took her hand. "I will not lie and say this will be easy. But I have spent 6 years doing something that meant nothing to me. I am done with that. I want to spend my time on something that matters. And this matters. I matter more than anything." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her solid warmth. "You saved me in more ways than one. Let me stay. Let me build this life with you." Grusha buried her face against his neck. "Yes, stay. Please stay." They held each other as the fire burned low, making promises to each other in the quiet darkness. Spring came slowly to the mountains, winter reluctant to release its grip. But eventually the snow began to melt, revealing brown earth and the first tentative shoots of new growth. The world came alive again with birdsong and the sound of running water from streams swollen with snowmelt. Tanner's wounds had healed completely, leaving raised scars that were still pink, but no longer painful. He had regained his strength through hard work and good food, his body harder and healthier than it had been in years. He no longer looked like a soldier, with his longer hair and beard and clothes made from homespun wool and leather. He looked like what he was becoming: a homesteader, a farmer, a man building something lasting. On the first truly warm day of spring, with the sun bright overhead and the air smelling of thawed earth and new growth, Tanner went to the barn and retrieved something he had been working on in secret for weeks. It was a small wooden figure, carved with painstaking care during the hours when Grusha was out hunting or checking her trap lines. He had used his knife and sandpaper to smooth every surface until it gleamed. The figure was of 2 goats, their heads pressed together affectionately. It was far from perfect. His carving skills were crude at best, but he had poured his heart into every careful cut. He found Grusha in the vegetable plot she had marked out near the cabin, turning soil in preparation for planting. She looked up as he approached, wiping sweat from her brow and smiling. "Are you finally going to help? I have been working out here for an hour while you hid in the barn." There was no real reproach in her voice, only affection. "I was working on something." Tanner held out the wooden figure. "For you." Grusha set down her shovel and took the carving, turning it over in her hands with wonder. "You made this." "I am not very skilled, but I tried. I know you love the goats and I wanted to make something that would last. A reminder." He felt suddenly nervous, worried his gift was inadequate. A reminder of what? Of this time. Of what we found here together. Of the life we are choosing to build. He took her hands, the wooden goats pressed between their palms. "I know we cannot marry. There are no laws or customs that would recognize a union between human and orc. But I want you to know that I am choosing you, today and every day forward. You are my partner, my love, my home. This is my vow to you." Grusha's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Tanner, you foolish, wonderful man." She set the carving down carefully on a nearby fence post, then took his face between her hands. "In my culture, we do not need priests or papers to make a binding. We need only intent and witnesses. The land is our witness. The sky and mountains and everything that lives here sees us." She pressed her forehead to his. "I choose you. I vow to stand with you, work beside you, build our life together. You are my mate, my partner, my home. This is my vow to you." They kissed there in the spring sunlight, surrounded by fresh earth and new life, and Tanner felt something settle deep in his soul. This was right. This was real. Everything that had come before, all the pain and loneliness and searching, had led him to this moment. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were grinning like fools. "We should plant the garden," Grusha said, though she made no move to release him. "The season is short here and we need every day." In a moment, First tell me what you think of the carving, honestly." She picked it up again, examining it with an artist's eye. "It is crude. The proportions are off and the detail work needs practice." She looked at him with such love that it took his breath away. "It is also the most precious thing anyone has ever given me. I will treasure it always." "Good. Because I plan to make you many more clumsy carvings over the years. You are stuck with my mediocre artistry now. I can think of worse fates." She kissed him again, quick and warm. "Now come. We have work to do." They spent the rest of the day working in the garden together, planting seeds and planning where each crop would grow. It was hard, dirty work, but they laughed and talked and occasionally stopped to steal kisses when the spirit moved them. By evening they were both exhausted and filthy, their hands caked with soil and their backs aching. Over dinner, Tanner brought up something that had been weighing on his mind. "I need to send word to my mother. She will have heard about the ambush by now. She probably thinks I am dead." Grusha nodded. "The nearest village is 2 days' walk south. They have a way station where messages can be sent. We could go together. What if someone recognizes me, asks questions about where I have been and who I am with? Then we tell them the truth. That you were wounded and I tended your injuries through the winter. That you have decided to stay and help work my homestead." She met his eyes steadily. "I will not hide you or what you are to me, not for their comfort. Some people will not react well. There may be trouble." "Let there be trouble. I am not afraid." The fierce pride in her voice reminded him that she came from warrior stock, even if she had chosen a different path. "We face it together or not at all." Tanner reached across the table and took her hand. "Together, then." They set out 3 days later, packs on their backs filled with cheese and dried meat from Grusha's stores. The journey south took them through mountain valleys, still patched with snow, and across streams running high with meltwater. Tanner had not traveled this country in daylight before, and he was struck by its harsh beauty. Steep peaks crowned with white, forests of pine and fir, meadows just beginning to green. It was isolated and challenging land, but it was also stunning. They saw no one on the first day, camping that night in a sheltered hollow where they built a small fire and slept close together under shared blankets. The second day brought them into more traveled territory, and late in the afternoon, they saw smoke rising from chimneys ahead. The village was small, perhaps 30 buildings clustered around a central square. Tanner felt his stomach tighten as they approached, but Grusha walked beside him with her head high and her shoulders back, projecting confidence. They attracted stares immediately. An orc woman and a human man, clearly traveling together. People stopped what they were doing to watch them pass. Grusha ignored the attention and led them directly to a sturdy building with a sign marking it as the trading post and way station. Inside, a grizzled man stood behind a counter, his eyes widening as they entered. "We need to send a message," Tanner said before the man could speak. "To a village 2 weeks' ride toward the capital. Can you arrange that?" The man recovered his composure, though his gaze kept flicking between them. "Aye, we can do that. Cost you 3 coppers for a standard message. More if it is long. Standard is fine." Tanner pulled out coins from his pouch and set them on the counter. "I need paper and ink." The man provided the materials, and Tanner composed his letter carefully. "Mother, I survived the ambush but was severely wounded. I have been recovering through the winter in the mountains. My injuries have healed and I am well. My enlistment is complete and I will not be returning to the army. I have found a place here and people who matter to me. I will visit when I can, but I wanted you to know I am alive and safe. Your loving son, Tanner." He sealed the letter and provided his mother's address. The man took it with barely concealed curiosity, but asked no direct questions. "Anything else you need?" the trader asked. "Seeds," Grusha said. And salt if you have it. Also needles and good thread. They spent the next hour conducting business, purchasing supplies they would need for the growing season. Other villagers drifted in and out of the trading post, all of them staring at the unlikely pair. Tanner heard whispers and muttered comments, some curious, others hostile. As they were preparing to leave, a man blocked the doorway. He was large and rough-looking, with the bearing of a soldier or mercenary. "That is an orc," he said flatly, pointing at Grusha. "I noticed," Tanner replied evenly. "Now please move. We have a long walk ahead of us." "What are you doing traveling with an orc? Are you her prisoner?" "I am no one's prisoner. We are partners. Now move aside." The man's face darkened. "Partners with an orc? That is unnatural, disgusting." Tanner felt his temper flare but forced it down. "Your opinion is noted. Now step aside." "I do not think so. I think maybe we should have a talk with the village council about this situation, about why a human man is consorting with monsters." The man's hand moved to the knife at his belt. Grusha stepped forward, putting herself slightly in front of Tanner. "I have done nothing wrong. I live on my own land and harm no one. This man is staying with me by his own choice. That is all you need to know. Orcs are not welcome here. You should go back to your mountain and stay there." "We are leaving," Tanner said firmly. "There is no need for conflict." "I disagree." The man drew his knife. "I think we need to teach you both a lesson about knowing your place." Things happened very fast after that. The man lunged forward with his knife. Grusha moved with startling speed, catching his wrist and twisting it sharply. The man cried out and the knife clattered to the floor. Before anyone else could react, Grusha had the man pinned against the wall, her forearm across his throat. "I do not want to hurt you," she said quietly, her voice deadly calm. "But I will defend myself and my partner if necessary. We are leaving now. You will not follow us. Do you understand?" The man gurgled something that might have been agreement. Grusha released him and stepped back, positioning herself between Tanner and the small crowd that had gathered. "We mean no trouble," Tanner said to the room at large. "We came to send a message and buy supplies. That is all. We are going now." They backed toward the door, Grusha keeping her eyes on the crowd. No one else moved to stop them, though the hostility in the room was palpable. Once outside, they walked quickly toward the edge of the village, not quite running but not dawdling either. They were almost clear when a voice called out behind them. "Wait!" Tanner and Grusha turned to find an older woman hurrying after them, her gray hair pulled back in a practical bun. "Please wait," she said again, catching up to them. "I wanted to apologize for that ugliness. Not everyone in this village is like that man." "But many are," Grusha said flatly. "Yes," the woman admitted. "Many are, but not all. I wanted you to know that." She reached into her apron and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "I heard you were buying seeds. These are from my garden. Beans and squash and herbs that grow well in harsh climates. A gift." Grusha took the bundle hesitantly. "Why?" "Because my daughter married a man from the eastern tribes against my wishes. I said terrible things to her. I called her foolish and worse. She left and I have not seen her in 5 years." The woman's eyes were sad. "I was wrong. Love is rare enough in this world without people trying to destroy it. I see the way you two look at each other. That matters more than the color of your skin or where you come from." Tanner felt his throat tighten. "Thank you. That means a great deal." The woman nodded. "Safe travels. And if you need anything in the future, my name is Margaret. The farm on the north edge of the village is mine. You would be welcome there." They thanked her again and left the village behind, walking quickly until the buildings were out of sight. Only then did they slow down, both of them releasing held breath. "Well," Tanner said, "that was eventful." Grusha let out a shaky laugh. "Yes, I did not expect to have to fight today. You were magnificent, the look on that man's face when you pinned him. Tanner took her hand. Are you all right? Yes, but angry and sad. She clutched the bundle of seeds. That woman, though, her kindness surprised me. There are good people everywhere, we just have to find them. Tanner pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. Come on, let's go home. They walked back toward the mountains as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The confrontation in the village had been unpleasant, but it had also shown them something important. Their choice to be together would not be easy. They would face prejudice and hostility. But they would also find unexpected allies and moments of grace. And they had each other, which was enough. The journey back took 2 days, and they arrived at the homestead as evening fell on the second day. The cabin looked welcoming in the dusk, smoke rising from the chimney where they had banked the fire before leaving. The goats bleated excitedly from the barn, demanding attention after their absence. Home, Grusha said softly, and Tanner heard the wonder in her voice. This place had been her refuge, her exile, but now it was something more. It was a home she shared, a life they were building together. Home, he agreed, and they went inside together. The spring passed in a blur of activity. They worked from dawn until dusk, planting the garden with their purchased seeds and Margaret's generous gift. The vegetable plot grew steadily, neat rows of beans and squash and herbs taking root in the rich soil. They repaired fences and expanded the goat pen, anticipating the kids that would be born in early summer. Tanner learned to hunt with Grusha's guidance, becoming proficient with the bow she taught him to use. They smoked and preserved meat, stocked their larder with dried goods, prepared for the next winter. The work was hard, often exhausting, but Tanner had never been happier. He went to sleep each night with aching muscles and dirt under his fingernails and Grusha's warmth beside him, and he felt more fulfilled than he ever had as a soldier. This was real. This mattered. The goats gave birth to 3 healthy kids in late spring, and Tanner was present for each birth, helping Grusha with the complicated deliveries. He held the tiny creatures as they took their first breaths, marveling at the miracle of new life. Grusha watched him with soft eyes. You are good at this, she said. You have gentle hands for a soldier. Former soldier, he corrected. I am a farmer now, or trying to be. You are succeeding. She leaned against his shoulder, watching the mother goat nurse her newborn. I am glad you stayed. I am glad you let me stay. They fell into easy silences more often now, comfortable enough with each other that words were not always necessary. They could work side by side for hours, communicating through gestures and looks, their partnership deepening into something that felt ancient and unshakable. Summer came hot and bright, the sun burning down on the mountain meadows and coaxing the garden into abundant growth. They harvested greens and early vegetables, preserving what they could not eat fresh. Tanner built a cold storage pit near the cabin, digging deep into the earth and lining it with stones. Grusha wove baskets from willow branches for storing root vegetables through the winter. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold, Grusha said something unexpected. I want to expand the homestead. Build another structure, maybe a proper workshop and storage house. We are outgrowing the cabin. Tanner considered this. That would take time and resources. We would need to fell trees, season lumber, quarry stone for a foundation. I know. It would be a project that takes years, not months, but I think we should start. She turned to look at him. Unless you are not planning to stay that long. I am staying forever if you will have me. Tanner took her hand. A workshop sounds perfect. We can start marking trees this fall, fell them over winter when the sap is down. By next spring we will have lumber ready. Grusha's face lit up. You would do that, commit to such a large project. I am already committed to the largest project of my life. Building a workshop is easy by comparison. He gestured between them. This, us, what we are creating here, that is what matters. Everything else is just details. She kissed him then, slow and deep, pouring all her feelings into the connection. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "I love you," she said. The words were simple but weighted with meaning. "I have not said it directly before, but I do. I love you, Tanner Whitlock." Joy exploded in his chest. "I love you too, Grusha. More than I thought possible. You are everything to me." They held each other as darkness fell and stars emerged overhead, the vastness of the sky a reminder of how small they were and yet how significant. Two lives intertwined against impossible odds, creating something beautiful in a harsh world. The rest of summer passed peacefully. They worked on their various projects, expanding their homestead bit by bit. Tanner built a proper chicken coop, and they traded with a passing merchant for 6 laying hens, which quickly became Grusha's favorites. She talked to them while collecting eggs each morning, praising their productivity and scolding them for being broody. They received a letter in return from Tanner's mother late in the summer. The message was brief but heartfelt. She was relieved he was alive, sad that he was so far away, but she trusted him to make his own choices. She asked him to visit when he could and to write more often. At the end, she added a postscript. "I hope whoever you have found makes you happy. You deserve happiness, my son." Tanner read the letter aloud to Grusha, his voice thick with emotion. "She knows. Somehow she knows. Mothers often do." Grusha rested her hand on his shoulder. "Will you visit her?" "In the fall, before winter makes travel impossible." "Will you come with me?" Grusha hesitated. "I do not know if that is wise. If she is not ready to meet me, my presence would only make things more difficult." She said, "I deserve happiness. You are my happiness. I want her to meet you, to know the woman I love." Tanner covered her hand with his. "But I will not force it if you are uncomfortable. Let me think about it." They left the subject alone for several weeks while they focused on the harvest. The garden produced abundantly, and they spent long days picking vegetables and preserving them for winter. Grusha taught Tanner to pickle cucumbers and beets, to dry herbs and store them properly. They worked until their hands were raw and their backs ached, but the satisfaction of a full larder made it worthwhile. As the leaves began to turn gold and the air took on an autumn chill, Grusha made her decision. "I will come with you to meet your mother. If she reacts badly, I will leave." "But you are right. We should not hide what we are to each other." So they planned their journey, arranging for Margaret from the village to check on the homestead while they were gone. The older woman had visited twice over the summer, bringing gifts of preserves and staying for tea, and she had proven herself a true friend. She agreed readily to watch over the animals and cabin. The trip to Tanner's home village took 12 days, traveling overland through steadily cooling weather. They stayed at inns when they could find them, camping rough when they could not. Tanner noticed the stares and occasional hostility they received, but he also saw curiosity and, occasionally, acceptance. The world was slowly changing, though not fast enough. They arrived at the village on a crisp autumn morning, smoke rising from chimneys and the smell of baking bread filling the air. Tanner led Grusha through familiar streets, feeling strange to be back in a place he had not seen in 7 years. Everything was smaller than he remembered, more cramped. His mother's cottage sat on the edge of the village, a neat stone building with a well-tended garden. Tanner's heart pounded as he knocked on the door. It opened to reveal a woman in her 50s, her brown hair streaked with gray and her face lined with care. But her eyes were bright and warm, and they widened with joy when she saw her son. "Tanner," she pulled him into a fierce embrace, tears streaming down her face. "My boy, My boy, you are really here. I am here, mother. Tanner held her tight, feeling 7 years of distance collapse. I am so sorry I stayed away so long. You are here now. That is what matters. She pulled back to look at him, taking in his longer hair and weathered face and the contentment in his expression. You look happy, truly happy. I am. Tanner took Grusha's hand and drew her forward. Mother, this is Grusha. She is the woman I wrote to you about, my partner, my love. His mother's gaze moved to Grusha, taking in her green skin and tusks and obvious strength. The moment stretched and Tanner held his breath. Then his mother smiled, warm and genuine. Welcome, Grusha. Any woman who makes my son look this happy is welcome in my home. Please, both of you, come inside. I want to hear everything. The tension drained from Grusha's shoulders. Thank you, mistress. Your kindness means a great deal. None of this mistress business. Call me Alina. She ushered them both inside, already talking a mile a minute about preparing tea and food and how much she wanted to hear about their life in the mountains. They stayed for 5 days, and they were some of the best days of Tanner's life. Alina and Grusha took to each other immediately, bonding over shared stories and a love of practical work. Alina taught Grusha a complicated stitch pattern for knitting, and Grusha showed Alina how to make a poultice from mountain herbs that eased the arthritis in her hands. Tanner watched them together, his mother and his love, and felt a profound sense of peace. This was what family should be, not bound by blood or law or convention, but by choice and affection and genuine care. On their last evening, as they sat by Alina's fire after a substantial dinner, she took both their hands. I want you to know how proud I am of you both. Tanner, you have found something real and precious. Do not let anyone take that from you. And Grusha, thank you for saving my son and for making him happy. You are my daughter now in all the ways that matter. Grusha's eyes shone with unshed tears. Thank you, Alina. I have not had a family in many years. I am honored to be part of yours. They embraced, the three of them, and Tanner felt like everything had finally fallen into place. The journey back to the homestead took 10 days, delayed by early snow in the mountain passes. By the time they arrived, winter had firmly established itself. But the cabin was warm and intact, the animals healthy, and Margaret had left a note saying everything had been fine during their absence. They settled back into their routine, preparing for the long winter ahead. But this winter would be different from the last. They were not strangers sheltering together out of necessity. They were partners, committed to each other and to the life they were building. On the first night back, as they lay in bed with snow falling softly outside, Grusha traced the scars across Tanner's chest with her fingertips. These are beautiful to me, she said again, echoing the words that had first broken down the walls between them. Every mark on you shows you survived to be here with me. I would not change a single one. And yours are beautiful to me, Tanner replied, his hand moving over the boar scar on her side. We are a matched pair, scarred and surviving and stronger for it. Partners in everything. Partners in everything, he agreed. They made love slowly, savoring each touch and kiss, expressing without words everything they felt. Afterward, they lay tangled together, warm and sated and completely at peace. Winter passed more quickly than the one before. They worked on indoor projects, carving and knitting and planning for spring. Tanner became quite good at woodworking, creating not just crude figures but functional items. Bowls and spoons and a beautiful set of shelves for Grusha's herbs. She praised each piece, displaying them proudly around the cabin. They talked more about expanding the homestead, drawing plans in the dirt near the fire and arguing good-naturedly about the best placement for the new workshop. Tanner wanted it near the barn for convenience, but Grusha argued for a spot that would get better morning light. They eventually compromised on a location that satisfied both requirements. Eleanor sent letters regularly, filled with news from the village and questions about their life. She included small gifts, knitted socks and preserved fruits, and once a beautiful shawl she had woven herself. They wrote back faithfully, describing their daily activities and the slow passage of winter. As the days gradually lengthened, and the worst of the cold began to ease, they started the hard work of felling trees for lumber. Tanner had learned much about woodcraft over the past year, and he put that knowledge to use selecting the best trees and planning how to transport them to the building site. They worked together with saw and axe, spending long days in the forest. The physical labor was demanding but satisfying. Each tree that fell was progress toward their future, a concrete manifestation of their commitment to building something lasting. They stripped branches and cut the trunks to length, then used Grusha's strength and a rope system to drag the logs to a clearing where they could season. By the time spring properly arrived, they had a substantial pile of logs ready to begin the seasoning process. It would take at least a year before the wood was ready to use, but that was all right. They had time. They had each other. They had a future stretching out before them, full of work and challenges and love. The garden was planted for the second year, this time with more confidence and efficiency born of experience. The goats thrived, and 2 of the females were pregnant again, promising to expand their herd. The chickens laid reliably, and Grusha had even managed to hatch a clutch of chicks, which she doted on like they were her own children. Life settled into a rhythm that felt both entirely new and ancient as the mountains around them. Work and rest, effort and reward, the slow accumulation of small victories that built into something meaningful. One warm evening in late spring, as they sat outside watching the stars emerge, Grusha said something that surprised him. "I have been thinking about children, our children." Tanner's breath caught. They had never discussed this directly, though he had thought about it privately. "What have you been thinking?" "That I want them. Someday, not immediately, but in time." She turned to look at him, her expression serious. "I know it would be complicated. A child of mixed blood would face challenges, but I believe we could raise them well, teach them to be strong and kind, to be proud of all parts of their heritage." "I want that too," Tanner said quietly. "I want to build a family with you. To watch our children grow up in this place we have created, to pass on what we have learned." He took her hand. "It would not be easy, but nothing worth having ever is." Grusha smiled, radiant and hopeful. "Then we agree. Someday when we are ready we will have children, a family of our own." They sealed the agreement with a kiss, and that night they loved each other with new purpose, imagining the future that awaited them. The second summer was even more productive than the first. Their garden flourished, the goat herd grew to 13 animals, and the chickens multiplied. They traded surplus eggs and cheese with Margaret and other farmers, slowly building relationships and establishing themselves as reliable neighbors despite the unusual nature of their partnership. More people began to accept them, though not everyone. There were still those who muttered about impropriety and unnatural unions. But Tanner and Grusha had learned to ignore the hostility, focusing instead on the connections they could build and the life they were creating. They started work on the workshop foundation in late summer, digging deep and laying stones with careful precision. It was backbreaking work, but they approached it with determination and even joy. Each stone they placed was another brick in the life they were building together, proof that they could create something lasting despite everything that stood against them. Margaret became a regular visitor, often bringing her grandson Thomas, a boy of about 12 who was fascinated by Grusha and asked her endless questions about orc culture. Grusha answered patiently, clearly touched by the boy's genuine curiosity and lack of prejudice. She taught him to carve wood and identify animal tracks, and he worshipped her as only a child can worship someone they admire. Elinor visited that summer as well, staying for 3 weeks and declaring herself in love with the mountains. She helped with the garden and the animals, marveling at how much her son had accomplished. Before she left, she pulled Tanner aside for a private conversation. "You have found your place," she said. "I can see it in everything you do. You are happy here, at peace." "I am, Mother. Happier than I ever thought possible." "Then I am happy for you, and I want you to know that when the time comes when you have children, I will be here to help. This is family now, all of it." She gestured around the homestead. "You have built something remarkable." Tanner embraced her, grateful beyond words for her acceptance and support. When she left to return to her village, it was with promises to visit again and invitations for them to spend the next winter with her if they wished. The second winter was mild compared to the first, with less snow and shorter periods of extreme cold. Tanner and Grusha used the time to work on interior projects, building furniture for the cabin and preparing supplies for the workshop construction that would resume in spring. They also talked more seriously about starting a family. Grusha consulted with Margaret, who had raised 4 children of her own, about the realities of pregnancy and childbirth. Margaret was enthusiastic and supportive, offering advice and promising to help when the time came. "I have delivered babies before," she said. "I would be honored to help with yours when you are ready." That spring, as the world came alive again with new growth, Grusha missed her monthly cycle. They waited another month to be sure, then another, and finally allowed themselves to believe it was real. Grusha was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy tinged with nervousness. They were about to embark on the most challenging and rewarding journey yet. But they faced it together as they faced everything, with love and determination. Grusha's pregnancy progressed normally, though she remained active and strong throughout, refusing to be coddled. She worked in the garden and tended the animals, only slowing down in the last months when her belly grew too large to move easily. Tanner was both terrified and amazed, watching her body change and feeling the baby move under his hand when he rested it on her stomach. They prepared a corner of the cabin as a nursery, building a sturdy cradle and gathering soft blankets and clothing. Elinor sent packages filled with baby items she had saved from Tanner's childhood, along with letters full of advice and excitement. Margaret visited frequently, checking on Grusha's health and offering reassurance. Everything was progressing as it should. The baby was strong and active. Grusha was healthy and capable. They would manage this just fine. The baby came on a cold morning in early winter, arriving 2 weeks before they expected. Tanner woke to Grusha gripping his arm, her face tight with pain. "The baby is coming," she said through gritted teeth. "Go get Margaret." Tanner ran faster than he ever had in his life, covering the distance to Margaret's farm in record time. She grabbed her supplies and they rushed back together, arriving to find Grusha pacing the cabin, breathing through contractions. Margaret took charge with calm efficiency, directing Tanner to boil water and gather clean cloths while she examined Grusha. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the day and into the evening. Tanner held Grusha's hand through it all, offering what comfort he could while feeling utterly helpless in the face of her pain. "You are doing wonderfully," Margaret encouraged. "The baby is in a good position, just a bit longer." Finally, as the sun set and painted the cabin in shades of gold and red, their daughter was born. She came into the world squalling and healthy, her skin a pale green and her tiny fists waving in outrage at being expelled from her warm nest. Grusha laughed and cried at the same time as Margaret placed the baby in her arms. "She is perfect. Tanner, look, our daughter." Tanner stared at the tiny creature, overcome with emotions too large for words. She had Grusha's green skin and his dark hair, already growing thick on her little head. Her eyes were amber like her mother's, and she had the smallest tusks he had ever seen, just tiny nubs that would grow as she did. "She is perfect," he agreed, his voice thick. "What should we name her?" They had discussed names but never settled on one. Grusha looked down at their daughter, studying her face. "Elara. It means star of hope in the old orc tongue. That is what she is to me, to us." "Elara," Tanner repeated, testing the name. "It is beautiful, perfect for her." Margaret cleaned up and checked both mother and baby thoroughly, declaring them both healthy and strong. Before she left, she embraced them both. "You have a beautiful family. I am honored to have been part of this moment." She wiped tears from her eyes. "I will check on you tomorrow. Get some rest, all of you." After she left, Tanner and Grusha lay together in bed with Elara between them, marveling at the tiny life they had created. She was so small, so vulnerable, and yet already fiercely herself. She nursed hungrily at Grusha's breast, her little hands clutching at her mother. "I never knew I could feel this way," Tanner whispered, touching Elara's soft cheek with one finger. "So full of love it almost hurts." "I know." Grusha rested her head against his shoulder. "We made this perfect little person. Despite everything that should have kept us apart, we found each other and created life." They sat in wonder and exhaustion, the three of them, as darkness fell and the world turned cold outside. But inside the cabin, there was only warmth and love and the beginning of a new chapter in their improbable story. Elara grew quickly, as healthy children do. She was a happy baby, curious and alert, already showing signs of both her parents' personalities. She had Tanner's easy smile and Grusha's fierce determination. When she wanted something, she made her demands known clearly and persistently. The homestead adjusted to accommodate the newest member of the family. The workshop construction was put on hold temporarily while they focused on caring for Elara and managing the daily necessities. But they did not mind. This time with their daughter was precious and fleeting. The workshop could wait. Elinor traveled to meet her granddaughter when Elara was 2 months old, making the long journey despite the winter weather. She wept when she held the baby for the first time, overwhelmed with joy. "She is beautiful, absolutely beautiful." Elinor traced Elara's features with gentle fingers. "She has your eyes, Grusha, and Tanner's nose, the best of both of you." They spent a wonderful month together, 3 generations under one roof. Elinor helped with Elara and the household tasks, giving Grusha time to rest and recover her strength. She also shared stories of Tanner's childhood, much to his embarrassment and Grusha's delight. When Elinor finally left to return home, it was with promises to visit again in spring and invitations for them to bring Elara to the village so everyone could meet her. "I am going to tell everyone about my beautiful granddaughter," Elinor announced proudly. "Let them gossip if they want. I am too happy to care." Tanner embraced his mother tightly. "Thank you for accepting us, for loving us exactly as we are. How could I not? You are my son. Grusha is my daughter, and Elara is my granddaughter. Family is family, regardless of what anyone else thinks." She kissed his cheek. "Be happy, my dear ones. That is all I want for you." Spring came, and with it new challenges and joys. Elara was old enough now to be more interactive, smiling and laughing and reaching for everything within her grasp. She loved the goats, giggling with delight whenever they were near. Grusha fashioned a carrier so she could take Elara with her while doing chores, and the baby was perfectly content to observe the world from her perch on her mother's back. They resumed work on the workshop. making steady progress now that Alara had settled into a predictable routine. Tanner often worked with his daughter strapped to his chest, her weight warm and solid against him. She seemed fascinated by the construction, watching intently as he measured and cut and assembled. "She is going to be a builder like her father," Grusha observed one day, watching them work together. "Or a farmer like her mother, or something entirely her own." Tanner kissed Alara's head. "Whatever she wants to be, we will support her." The summer of Alara's first year was perhaps the best yet. The homestead thrived, expanded, and improved through their continued efforts. The workshop was completed, a solid structure with good light and plenty of space for projects. Tanner set up a proper workbench and began taking commissions from nearby farms, crafting furniture and tools that earned them extra income and helped build their reputation. Grusha expanded the garden and added sheep to their livestock, 3 ewes that would provide wool for spinning and weaving. She taught herself to use a drop spindle, producing yarn that she dyed with natural materials, and used to create beautiful woven goods. They were building not just a homestead but a livelihood, a real sustainable life that could support their growing family. On Alara's first birthday, they held a small celebration. Margaret came with Thomas and several other neighbors who had become friends over the years. Alina made the long journey as well, bringing gifts and her infectious joy. They feasted on roasted goat and fresh vegetables from the garden, and Grusha made a sweet cake with honey and berries that Alara demolished with enthusiastic messiness. As the sun set and their guests departed, leaving the family alone once more, Tanner looked around at everything they had built. The cabin and workshop, the thriving garden and healthy animals, the friends who had accepted them, the daughter sleeping peacefully in her cradle. And most importantly, the woman he loved, strong and beautiful and his partner in all things. "We did it," he said softly. "We actually did it, built a life together despite everything." Grusha took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his in the way that had become as natural as breathing. "We did, and we will continue doing it, building and growing and facing whatever comes next, together, always together." They stood at the threshold of their home, looking out over the land they had claimed and cultivated and made their own. The mountains rose around them, steadfast and eternal. The stars emerged overhead, countless points of light in the vast darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, wild and free. The goats settled in their barn, safe and content. Inside the cabin, their daughter slept peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams babies dream. And Tanner and Grusha held each other, 2 scarred souls who had found unexpected love in the most unlikely circumstances, who had chosen each other despite all the reasons they should not, who had built something real and lasting and beautiful. The orc girl had traced the scars across his chest and said they were beautiful to her. In doing so, she had given him a gift more precious than he could express. She had seen him, truly seen him, scars and all, and loved what she found. And he had done the same for her, looking past the green skin and tusks to see the remarkable woman beneath. Their love story was not a grand epic of kings and kingdoms. It was something quieter but no less profound. The story of 2 people finding home in each other, of choosing love over fear, hope over prejudice, partnership over loneliness. And as the night deepened and the world turned toward tomorrow, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they had faced everything else, together, with love, with determination, with the absolute certainty that they had found something worth fighting for. Their story was far from over. There would be more winters to endure, more work to do, more obstacles to overcome. Alara would grow, and perhaps one day they would have more children. The homestead would continue expanding. Their reputation would spread. Some would accept them, Others would not, but none of that mattered as much as this moment. This perfect, peaceful moment where everything they had fought for was real and solid and theirs. Tanner turned to Grusha, this strong, green-skinned woman who had saved him in every way a person could be saved, and he smiled. "I love you," he said, the words as familiar and essential as breath. "I love you too," she replied, and in her amber eyes he saw their entire future reflected back. They went inside, closing the door against the night, and held each other in the warmth of their home. Outside, the world turned on, indifferent and challenging and often cruel. But in this one small place, carved out of wilderness and built on love, there was only peace. Home, family, forever.